What is an unconventional way your parents taught you a life lesson as a kid, which makes you think to yourself, whoa, that was good parenting, now that you're older? Told me from young adolescence that no matter the situation, if I was wasted or high or whatever, if I was ever in trouble I could call my dad and he would come pick me up, no questions asked. It seemed unconventional compared to my friends with strict parents who went buck wild when they weren't under their supervision, but it taught me to stay safe and smart, and I ended up being a pretty good and stable kid who knew I could go to my parents if I needed them. We had a similar system. I knew that questions would be asked, but that I wouldn't get judgment. I only had to call my mom for a ride one time, and I did it without hesitation. My mom showed up with a bottle of water, some crackers, and a bucket for if I got sick. Teaching your kids that you are there for them, even when they are not perfect, is the best parenting strategy for building kids who trust you. That is the sweetest thing. I hope to be a cool mom like that one day. When I was 3 I always kicked my shoes off in the car seat. Mom would have to put them on again at every destination. One time we came home and there was snow in the ground. I had kicked my shoes off again, and my mom just about had it. My dad came to the car and said, "Okay Thea, eat. Get out and go inside." "But daddy, it's cold." "I know." Never kicked my shoes off again. Tried this with my kid. She got out and played in the damn snow. I go barefoot any time of the year if I can. I walk outside in the freezing rain, snow, ice. My husband looked at me and said, "Figure it out. She's yours." He is rarely ever barefoot. Hates anything touching his feet, yada yada. I never figured it out though. I just let her be barefoot now and take flip-flops wherever we go just in case the shoes come off. Lol. Looks like there's a lesson in here too. Just let the damn kids be. They'll be fine. Letting me drink straight vanilla extract. Ha 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 ha. Mine was go ahead and eat that pepper. Just don't come begging me for water because you were too dumb to listen. My dad always pitted my brother and I against each other in Tabasco chugging contests. He said the winner would get hair on their chest, and what 6-year-old doesn't want to be just like dad? I've had to slow a bit down on the spice in my 40s, but I spent years as the person who could eat everything too hot for anyone else to touch. When I asked a question she didn't know the answer to, my mother would go out of the way to find an answer or find someone who knew. This humanized her and allowed me to understand that you don't have to be an expert on everything, but you should always know where to look for answers. I'm a primary school teacher and I use this technique too. We write the question on the board, and as a class we think of all the different methods we could use to try and answer it. Then whoever answers it by the next day gets a special prize. It's such an underrated tool to make kids more independent and instill curiosity. Props to your mum. I work in special ed, predominantly with students who are high functioning, and this is a great tool to use with kids who are non-compliant. Once they engage, it's easy to teach them. My parents never had expectations for grades when my siblings and I were growing up. They would say, as long as your work is authentic and you know that you gave it your best effort, that's all we care about. My parents would never scold us if we received a bad grade. They never voiced any expectations they may have had concerning post-secondary education, and they would give out the same amount of praise whether we received a B or an A+. My parents now have 4 high-achieving children at prestigious universities with very healthy attitudes towards education. Your children are more likely to appreciate and excel at learning, attributed to their own genuine curiosity, if it is not something they are repeatedly pressured to perfect. My parents were like that as well. At the end of each school year we would always get a present when we got our final grades, no matter what the grades were. My mom just said, as long as you finish the school year, you will be rewarded for it. So I've never felt pressured to get good grades. I only knew I should continue, even if it doesn't turn out perfect. Now both my sister and I have master's degree and are currently working on our PhDs. I got my first paycheck from the first job I ever worked. My dad drove me to the bank to cash it in, and as we are walking out I'm counting the money in my hands, because I honestly couldn't believe that it was all mine. My dad then rips it out of my hands and starts running. Obviously, I start sprinting after him and when we finally get to his car I go, what the hell was that for? He said, if you're stupid enough to flaunt money like that, someone else is gonna take it. It doesn't matter if you have a $5 bill in your hand, some idiot might kill you for it. He eventually have me back my money, but I was still a little salty for the rest of the day. No, but that really is an important lesson. People kill each other every day for something that sometimes isn't even worth a dollar. I never take money out when I'm in public. My husband threw a tantrum when he was little because his mom wouldn't buy him something he wanted, and his mom got down next to him and said, "Now I will never buy you that for the rest of your life." He never threw a tantrum again. I laugh every time I think of that story. It's just so hardcore. But it worked. My sister and I, both 21 plus, would throw out obnoxious tantrums to show my little brother, 4, how silly he looked. It was fun. We would start stomping our feet and crying and do that annoying kid's wail. He would mostly end up laughing, but he never threw more tantrums. Or, we would let him walk to the cashier with the item and have the cashier ask him for money. The shock of having a stranger demand money quieted him. We sometimes film our daughter when she throws tantrums. It actually tends to increase the intensity of them when she sees the phone come out, but she's able to laugh at herself a little when we show it to her once she's calmed down. The frequency of the outbursts diminish significantly after applying this approach. Not letting me get a dog until I was old enough to take care of it. Same. My sister and I wrote a puppy constitution that laid out all of responsibilities, and my parents were impressed by it. It should have been named that Puppy Articles of Confederation because we didn't follow through for crap. A well executed Articles of Confederation joke. I literally laughed out loud. After throwing sand in my sister's eyes so many times, which resulted in my mom hanging out with us in the sandbox, my mom took a kiddie shovel of sand and flung it in my face. Most people would say, that's so mean. But I don't blame her. I was a little a swipe that wouldn't stop doing a swipe things until I learned the hard way. One of my aunts had a biting phase that lasted until my grandma saw her bite a kid, scooped her up, and bit her back. My mother did that to my brother. Never bit someone again. Once during a family camping trip, my mom had run out to the store to get something, and my dad was left to set up campsite with me and my brother. Don't remember exact age, but we were probably 3/4 at that point. My bro and I are Irish twins, 53 weeks apart, so we butted heads often and were particularly not getting along well this day, and I guess my dad had had enough of trying to set up a camper with 2 cranky and unhelpful toddlers, so he takes my brother and I and ties us together, face to face, and he says, figure out how to get along or kill each other. Best part of the story is, after being tied up for about 10 minutes and settling down a bit, my mom returns from her errand and gets out of the car and walks past us without a second glance and just says hi boys and goes in the camper. Ice cold. And this was pre-cell phones, so she pulled up with no knowledge of her tied up sons. Absolutely badass. Looking back now, I could fill this thread with alternative parenting techniques they used. More stories please. And how long did it take you and your brother to calm down that day? Do you get along now? Op killed his brother. It was the only way. When I was really little, probably like 6, 7, my dad gave me $5 while we were at SeaWorld. I wanted to win one of those huge stuffed animals, so I went to spend my $5 at what was basically a gambling booth. Obviously I lost, and I had no money left. He said, son, that is why you don't gamble, and then he took me to the gift shop to look at what they were selling. They had a smaller stuffed animal for $5. Look what you could have gotten. Since then I never have been, nor will I ever be a gambler. We did this with our second daughter at the claw machine at Steak and Shake. She put her $5 in, and on the first try, pulled out a big ass stuffed turbo. Then got mad that she didn't pull anything out with 9 remaining tries. She learned something that day, but I have no clue what the lesson was. It's better to be lucky than good. I'd say 3 things that stand out to me as I think about it. 1. Not entirely unconventional, but I started receiving a weekly allowance from a very young age. They set up a bank account and everything, but what was probably different was, to receive any money, I had to show my expenses. For instance, I went to the nearby store, this was the 90s, and got cum cola that needed to be shown in my expenses properly and be accounted for me to receive more. None of this mom dad I need money flew with them. They would just say you have money, use your own. I stopped frivolous spending and would save money. I think some people these days lack a sense of where their money is going. A lot of it goes on eating out, too. From a young age they respected my opinion. For instance, I was 4 or 5, and we needed to buy a microwave oven, so when we were in the store, they'd ask me what I liked or disliked about a certain model or such, and consider that is a purchase. It made me learn to look at things a lot more closely and form objective opinions instead of just subjective feeling. That unit lasted us for about 22 years. 3. The whole don't reward bad behavior thing. This might not sit well with people, but consider things were a lot safer back in the day. So as a small child, I was never really whinny. I'd sit quietly and play and was apparently not fussy. But again, we were going to the stores and I wanted something, and they said no, it's not good for you. And you see those videos of those spoiled kids crying and wailing and hitting people, having a tantrum, because someone said no? Well, it wasn't quite like that, but apparently I was close to having a tantrum and crying about them saying no. So what they did was say, you start making a fuss about this when we've explained to you why we've said no, then we'll leave you right here. So I did, and so they did. They just walked off. None of this please be quiet and don't cry and we'll give you candy nonsense, which is basically rewarding a child for having a tantrum. They learn that if they cry and make a fuss, they will get something nice. I learned if I make a fuss, they'll leave me in the middle of a supermarket. They weren't far off and they were watching the whole time. Later on that day they apologized to me, even though I was child, and explained their actions. I never made a fuss about anything after that. I would ask, and if they said no then I'd ask why. They'd explain and I'd listen. So in conclusion, TL, doctor, you could say they treated me like a small human and not a snotty child, leading me to be more grown up than my peers of the same age through the years. If I got fussy or tantrum while as a small child, I would get told, if you keep this up, we are leaving. And if I didn't fix my behavior, my mom would stand up and take me out of wherever we were instantly. Restaurants, movie theaters, grocery stores, whatever. She taught me that I don't have the right to ruin someone else's shopping / dining / whatever experience by acting a fool. And having set expectations and consequences that don't waive meant that my age of being fussy was very short-lived. I don't think she meant to teach me anything, but I learned something nonetheless. I was drinking hot cider on a bumpy hayride and trying to keep the cider from spilling by holding it completely still. My mom told me to sway the cup in unison with the cider so it doesn't splash out. It taught me how to manage people like in managerial positions or kids, especially teens. You can't expect to keep a vice grip on someone to control them, or they'll lash out. You have to give them some lenience for mistakes, independence, or obliviousness. That is actually amazing. It's super simple yet really deep. I agree, it makes so much sense. Wish someone had taught me that when I was a single parent and trying to keep a grip of my whole life. A little lenience here and there would have made a huge impact. Telling me the basics of how babies are made, that is man and women have sex and a baby comes out of the vag, when I was 5 or 6. Mom didn't say anything graphic, just man and woman have sex, baby is made, baby comes out of vag. She said it way better than how I just phrased it. She straight up told me she never understood why parents use the stork analogy. She knew that we would learn the truth eventually, so why delay the inevitable? I didn't even care about what sex actually was. I was just glad I knew how it worked. Mostly, the fact that you put quotes around man and woman have sex, baby is made, baby comes out of vag leads me to believe that this is, in fact, exactly what your mother said to you when you were 6. So from a very young age, my dad told me that my job was to do well in school, and if I did my job well, my parents would generally trust me. He was a company man for an oil and gas company, which means he was the top dog on the oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, so he was home for 7 days and gone for 7 days. Now, to this day, I work in oil and gas and people will ask me if my dad is my dad because he is known for being a gigantic asshole, but in a malicious compliance sort of way. High school rolls around, and mom is sick of being both good and bad guy. So she starts this program of getting permission from both parents. I wanted to go to this party. I ask mom, she says, okay, but go ask your father. Normally, I wouldn't have to ask, so this is a new experience. When I ask, he said, can you go to a party? What did your mother say? Here is where I fricked up. I said, she said to ask you. I should have said yes. Well, dad says, well, she wouldn't have said that unless she didn't want you to go. I tell him that she had originally said yes, but he wouldn't budge. I mentioned fairness and he did the whole life isn't fair. But then he added, you gotta realize that some people are just freaking assholes and don't want you to get what you want for whatever reason. Learn how to deal with it. I could not believe that my dad was being an asshole just because. So every now and then he would say no just to do it. Not too bad, but I was able to not flip my crap when it did happen. One time, I wanted to go to a rave and was gonna do the whole you tell your parents you at my house and vice versa thing, so I was not taking no for an answer. He pulls the no out. Well, I asked him what the punishment was. He tells me no television for 20 minutes. I was incredulous. Was this the punishment the whole time? So I say, I'm taking the punishment. My mom pipes up and says, no, that isn't how this works. If one says no, it's no. You can't just decide to take the punishment. Life doesn't work that way. Actually, Karen, it does work that way. Some punishments do not fit the crime. You have to have all of the information possible to make the most informed decision. Thanks, Dad. Sounds like he's teaching you to be a bit sociopathic. Not a fan of this. This dad was not making anything better for his partner. My parents would let us have a little bit of red wine with Thanksgiving, Easter, and Christmas dinner. Mom was from Australia, and they met in Europe, so didn't have strict puritanical views on it. Thanksgiving when I was 8, I finished my wine and asked for a refill. My dad said sure. Then I asked to finish my little brother's glass. Sure. And then finish my dad's glass. Sure. That's the night I met the porcelain goddess. I also didn't try to drink any alcohol again until I was 22. If anything, my dad may have regretted it a little because I would complain if he used cooking wine in a dish. Anything that tasted like point wine or alcohol was gross to me for a long time. Took me a fat 10 seconds to realize porcelain goddess was toilet. Took me reading your comment. Slow today.